Hey, I'm glad you're here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Scratch programming to create a program that makes a pie chart, a pie graph. So by the end of this video, you're going to have something that does this. Before we start, we got to think about how we can break our problem into parts. A pie graph is a circle representation where all the values are percentages that should add up to 100. But a full circle, an angle, is 360 degrees. So we have to find some way to take the data that we input, convert it to percents, and then convert it to angles. Luckily, there's a way to do that. First, we're going to start by getting the basic drawing. And then we're going to make a list for our data. And then we're going to add it all up to get a total, and that'll be our 100%. Once we have the 100%, we can multiply it by 3.6, and we're going to get 360 degrees. And then we'll add a little bit of color so that you can differentiate between the sections. All right, ready to get started? Here we go. So here I am with the blank project. First thing you're going to want to do is delete the Scratch cat. He's a nice guy, but we don't need him right now. And then go to Add Extension down here at the left, and add the pen extension. So now you have the pen tool. We will use that momentarily, but we're going to make a new sprite. So if you hover over choose a sprite down here in the bottom right, go to paint, and we need a line. We're going to be able to change the color of this line in our code. We're going to pick the line tool. So pick a color. I like red to start with, and we're going to draw a line. So I've made my line 4. We can adjust this later on because it's a vector graphic. And I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to hold shift, and that will lock it to 45 degrees. And I'm going to draw a line straight up, and there we go. Now I'm going to go to the select tool, this arrow here, and I'm going to zoom in because my eyes are older. And I'm going to try to grab this. And if you see whatever vector graphic I grab like this, you'll see there's a little bit of a plus right here, and that's the center of what I have selected. Now I want to match that up with the center of my sprite, because this black crosshair here, if I hold this, it goes darker. Black crosshair here is the center of rotation for the sprite. Whatever you draw, it will rotate around that point. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to hold it over here, and it's going to snap. If this rotates from the center, we're going to get a line that rotates like this and has a top and a bottom. We only want one line sticking out from the center. So now that I've locked it to the center, I'm going to hold shift and press up on my keyboard when it's still selected. And I'm going to line up that bottom vertice, that bottom point right here, with the center of rotation. So if I zoom out, yours should look something like this. You can adjust the scale later. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but that's the line we're going to use, okay? I'm going to name my sprite line. Now we have our line. What we're going to do first is we're going to get this line to rotate 360 degrees. It's going to make a stamp of itself every rotation, every single degrees. So we're going to start with a when start is clicked, and then we're going to drag out, go to control, which is where we get our ifs and our loops. And we're going to grab a repeat loop here, and we're going to change the 10 to 360 because there's 360 degrees in a full circle. And then we're going to go to the pen tool, and we're going to drag out an erase all, put it in between there. So this is the start of our program. When our program starts, it's going to erase whatever was there, because if you had different numbers, we don't want to see those. We want to see a brand new graph each time. So we're going to erase all, we're going to repeat 360 times. We're going to stamp, which makes a stamp, a copy of the line that doesn't have variables. It's not a clone. If you know what clones are, a clone has variables. A clone is a copy of the sprite. This is just a visual copy. This is just a stamp. It's like if you had a stamp and you were stamping it on paper. We are just making a visual copy of it. I'm going to use the stamp tool, and then I'm going to go to motion and drag a turn clockwise and make it turn by 1 degree. So just with this code, if you press play right now, you have a circle, you have a full circle. This will draw your whole circle. Ta-da, you did it. There's a little bit more to go. We're gonna also make sure that this sprite is centered. So I'm dragging out a go to X, Y, and I'll just put 0 in here because in Scratch, an X of 0 and a Y of 0 is the center of our screen. So now no matter where this line is, if I could grab it like that and break it while it's running, it's going to go to 0, 0 when I start the program. It won't look like that if you don't play with it. So we have it rotating 360 degrees, but we're going to need some variables to help our program know where it is in the rotation. So I'm going to go to variables and go to make a variable, and this variable is going to keep track of where I am in the loop of 360 degrees. I am going to call this degree count, and this is going to go through my drawing loop and tell me, it's going to let me know what degree that we're drawing at, okay? And for all sprites, we don't need many sprites in this, I now have a degree count. So at the beginning of my program, I want to reset all my variables just like we did in erase all. So I'm going to drag out a set degree count, and I'm going to set it to 0. When it goes through my loop, every time it goes through my loop, I'm going to use a change degree count by 1. So the first time it goes through the loop, it stamps, it turns 1 degrees, and then it adds 1 to the degree count. And that variable lets us know where in the rotation our line is. If you have this up on the screen and you press play now, you can see a degree count, and it's going to go all the way to 360 and then stop. The other thing we haven't added yet is to set the direction. You'll notice if I press play, it resets my degree count and it starts the rotation here. And that's because I haven't told it what my direction is to start. It just keeps using the old one. So Scratch has a default direction for sprites of 90 degrees up. So we're going to go to motion, and we're going to grab a point in direction, and we'll put that where we put the X and the Y, and we'll say point direction 90. Now if you press play, it'll start from the top every time. Okay, so we have it drawing, we have a degree count. Next, we're going to need a list to keep track of our data so that we can enter our data in so that our program can look at it and do the calculations to figure out what color to draw. How far do I draw this percentage? So if you go to variables, we've made a variable called degree count, but down here, there's a button called make a list. Now a list is exactly like what it sounds. It's like a shopping list or a list of numbers. If I press make a list, you get this screen that says new list. We're gonna name our list data list, and we're gonna press OK. So in here, you'll see on the right, I could do a bunch of things. If you have data from maybe a spreadsheet or a graphing calculator or something else, you can right click this list and click import, and it'll take text files. It'll take a list of data. If you press this plus right here, you can enter in your own data. Now I'm going to add a few numbers. So these are going to be the numbers that I want to represent as percents on my graph. I don't have to know the percentage of them yet. This could be small numbers, these could be large numbers. This could be a ton of numbers or just a few numbers. We're going to use our program to convert our data to percentages. So I'll do some small numbers for fun. Let's do 5. Let's do 23. Let's do 62 and 13 and 20. A bunch of odd numbers in there. If you accidentally add too many values, you can click this blank place and press X. We don't want any blank spaces because those aren't numbers, and our program won't know what to do with them. We're going to need to tell our program how to add these together to make a total. So we're going to need another loop, and here's where you get to see some of the amazingly powerful applications of a list. So I'm going to go and grab from control another repeat loop. If I go to lists in variables, if I go to variables, you'll see that lists have a lot more options here. So if you go down to here, you'll see length of data list. And if I click this, you'll see I have 5 values here. Length of my list is 5. So if I pop this into the repeat loop, it's going to repeat as many times as long as my list is. If I add 20 pieces of data into my list, it'll repeat 20 times. This is how you make your program dynamic. It'll loop as many times as there are items in your list. We need to make a new variable called total, and this will hold what our total of our data is. So go to make a variable and say data total. At the beginning, we're going to set our data total to 0 to erase whatever was in there. And then we're going to, in our loop, we're going to change our data total by change adds to whatever it was. So we're going to go down to our list here. We're going to grab out an item 1 of data list, put it in there. We're also going to need one more variable to keep track of where we are in the loop. So go back to make a variable. We're going to make a new variable called count. And this is a generic one that we're going to use twice. Count, same thing as degree count. This one is less specific, but we're going to put count here into there. And we're also going to put a change count by 1 in our repeat, at the end of our repeat there. Okay, we also have to set count at the beginning. So bring out a set count and set it to 1. To review, we made a count variable, we made a data total variable. We have a set count to 1 to start it, to reset it. And then we have a set data total to 0. This is the total of our data. We repeat by the length of data list. We're going to change data total every time, but by whatever item we're on. This count variable lets us do this. It lets us go 1, add 5. Okay, go to 2, add 23. 3, add 62. 4, 13, and so on. After we add the item, we're going to increase the count variable so that when it goes around again, we will be on the next item of the list. So this count variable lets us go through the list and say, I want this one. Okay, next I want this one. I want this one. I want this one. It lets us alternate between our items. It lets us target our items sequentially. Okay, so that's all we need for that. You'll see if I press this now, my data total is 123. So it's added up all of these numbers and it's gotten 123. That's the next part. We got the total. So you can put this section of the code into the stack now, into the full stack. Just put the repeat 360 underneath and then drag the rest of this on here. Now our program resets everything, goes through, calculates the total of our list, and then draws the circle. Well, we need to tell it to draw our data. But to do that, we have to do some calculations. We have to change our total to percents. But now we have 100. So we are going to move this over here for now. We're going to drag out another repeat loop, and we are also going to do the same thing as we did with the last one. If you go to variables, scroll down to your list and grab a length of data list. We're going to take the data from our list, we're going to compare it to the total, and then we're going to find the percentage from that and put it into another list. So we need another list. All right, so back to variables, make a list, and we'll call this one percent list. So now we have another list. I'm going to put it on the right side of my screen so I can see my circle. Same thing as we did here. Very similar. We need a count variable, but we already have a count variable. So I'm just going to drag out this set count again and set count to 1, just like we did before. And I'm going to drag in a change count by 1. So same thing. It's going to go through our data list and go through each item. But now we're going to need to do the calculation where it looks at the item of our list, compares it to the total, calculates the percent, and then puts that percent into our percent list. So we're going to need one more variable called percent conversion. And this is going to hold the percent once it's calculated. And then it's going to send it to the percent list. So this one we're not adding to, so we don't really need to reset it. If you just drag out a new variable and put it into our loop, change it to percent conversion, you have what we need to set up our calculation. Do you know how to calculate a percent of something if you have the total? Let's say your total is 100. 100%. And you have one item that is 20. If you want to find out what part of something is a percentage of a whole, you can divide that part by the whole, and then you can multiply it by 100, and that'll give you the percent. So knowing how to make an equation to calculate the percent of something, we can go to our operators where all our fun math stuff is. We're going to need a division, we're going to need a divide, we're going to need a multiply. So just like we did when calculating the total, we're going to go to variables and we're going to scroll down to item 1 of data list, and then we're going to go to variables and grab a count. So this is the exact same as we have right here, item count of data list. But this we're going to put in the divide. So it looks like this. And then we've calculated the total. So we have a variable called data total. If I put that in there, that's going to take my item of the list and divide it by the total. To get A percentage, we just have to do one more thing, and that's multiply by 100. So if I take this division operator that we built and put it into my multiplier here, I have that calculation. This is just like brackets. And then I just have to multiply it by 100. And whatever, right now my data total is 123. If I set my count to 2, which would be 23, I can press this and it's telling me that 23 is 18.70% of 123. That seems right to me. So there's one more step we have to do. A circle is not 100 degrees. A circle is 360 degrees. So we need one more multiply from operators, and we're going to drag that out and then drag in the calculation we just did and multiply the whole thing by 3.6. Because 3.6 times 100 will give us 360. If we have smaller parts, whatever percentage it is, we can multiply that by 3.6 and that'll convert it to what we need to show in a pie graph. So here's the most complicated part of this. We have an item count of data list divided by data total inside a times 100 inside a times 3.6. If you put this into our set of our percent conversion, we have what we need to make our percent list. But we need to export this into the percent list. So go to variables and we say add. Drag out an add thing, change data list to percent list, and then drag in a percent conversion and add that underneath. So this whole process does our calculation, figures out what percent is this part of the whole, multiplies it by 100 and then by 3.6, and then adds that percentage to our percent list. And then it increases the count and does it again until it's hit the end of our list. So take this stack and put it in between our drawing loop and our total loop. So right there, and now you have this stack, and if you press play, you'll see your percent list on the right propagate, which means fill up, and there it goes. We have now taken our data list, converted it to percents, and drawn a circle. But right now the circle has nothing to do with our lists. So we just need to add in that last step. Oh, you can get rid of this set count too. Okay, final step in this process. So we're gonna add some color to our line every time it gets to the next part of our list. So it'll start at red or whatever color you chose, and then it'll add some color when it gets to the next one. But we need to create some logic to tell it that it's on the next section. So we'll do that. Okay, we already made a variable to kind of keep track of this. So this degree count, we're actually going to drag it up before the stamp. And we need to make another variable called current list line. So this variable will keep track of which line we are on in our list. We have one variable to keep track of how many degrees we're at, and then one variable to keep track of which line of our list we're on. So go to control, drag out an if. We need to keep track of which line we're on the list. So the first one is going to start at 1. It's going to go, in my program, it's going to go 14 degrees. And then we're going to increase this variable to tell it to restart and then do 67 degrees. So if you go to operators, we're going to need an equals. And we're going to need a greater than. And this is all going to be inside of an or. We'll build this one first. So in our equals, we are going to go to our variables and we'll say if our degree count equals the item in our list, if we have gone as many degrees as the item in our percent list, which in my case is 14. So if this variable has gone to 14, then do what's in here. But since we're using percents and we have decimal numbers, we'll do the exact same thing for a greater than as well. So if degree count equals, go to your list and say item 1 of data list, but we're going to change data list to percent list, and we're going to go to our variables and drag out the new variable we just made called current line list. So if degree count equals the item of current line list of percent list, and then do the same thing for are greater than. So just duplicate this item current line list of percent list and duplicate this degree count, and you have a copy, and you can put this in your OR, and you have is equal or greater to is what we just created. We're checking if it's equal or greater than the percentage that we have just calculated. But we haven't set current line list yet, so we have to do that right before we start this loop. So drag out a set and put it in between at the beginning of our draw loop here and change this set current line list to 1. And that's because our lists always start with a 1, entry 1. This is almost done. We need to do one more check. We need to make sure that we haven't gone past the amount of entries in our list. We don't want this to keep drawing when it gets to 360. We're going to also drag out from operators an and we're going to drag out from variables a current line list and a length of data, which we're going to change to percent list, and we'll need a less than from operators. I'm going to put the length of percent list in the greater than section over there. I'm going to put the current list into the front, and so this checks, is my current list line less than the length of my list? So we're going to put this in the right of the and we're going to drag this first one we made into there. So this is using ORs and ANDs, and basically it's checking if our degree count is greater than or equals than something, and we haven't gone over the amount of items in the list, then go into here and change colors. So this is a big long line. Hopefully you got that. If you need to stop the video, go back and figure out this line because it's a big long one. There's a link to the finished product in the description. Anyways, now that we've done this check, we need to reset some of these variables. So drag out a set. So we need to reset the degree count because if we've gone the amount of degrees, we need to reset it. So go into set and find your degree count and reset your degree count to 0. And then drag out a change, and we'll change our current list line by 1. And then we will also go to looks and drag out a change color effect by 25. And I will change this to 10. You can change this number and see what it does. Now we have it. If you take this new section we just made, and if you got it right, you can drag it in to our repeat 360 loop. And if you press play, the moment of truth, it's red. It's orange. It's another orange. It's a big one, and then it's yellow, and then it's light green. So this is going through the spectrum of colors. If I change this color value, if I want to change it by a larger value, that'll go through more different colors because it makes larger jumps in the color spectrum. So if you have a shorter list of data, you may want to make that color effect change by a larger value. If you have a long list of data, you may want less. You can experiment with that. You may have thought we're done. Just about, but there's one problem. You can look at my percent list. I've run this a few times now, and it's made 27 values, and I only have 12 values in my list. So we forgot to reset the list. So if you go to variables and go down to delete all, you can take this delete all. Oh, don't delete your data list or that'll happen. I just deleted my data list. Don't press it. And drag out a delete all, but don't click it yet. Change it to percent list. If you click it and it's still set to data list, it'll delete your data like I just did. But that's okay. So to fix that one thing, go to variables, scroll down to delete all of, and change it from data list to percent list. But drag this out and put it at the beginning of your program so that it clears the percent list and it makes the calculations again. So now I'm going to punch in some new numbers. And now with my new numbers, let's see, will it change? Will it adapt to the new numbers I put in? There you go. Look at it. It's beautiful. So congratulations, you've created your own pie graph generator. We could do one thing to make this instant. If you don't want to wait, I like watching it draw it, but if you're sick of waiting for it to draw, there's one trick we could do. Go to My Blocks and go to Make a Block and name this something like Do It Faster! Something like that. and then select Run Without Screen Refresh, and then press OK. Now you just made a block or a function, so it created this define. Take all of your code and drag it from the when start is clicked into that do it faster definition, and drag out from my blocks a do it faster. Now, if you press play, it should do it instantaneously. To test this, you can add some data. I know mine's not displaying, so 950. So I've just added some data to try it, to test it with my new values, and here we go. I'm gonna press go and pop, look at that. Instant pie graph. Congratulations, you've done it. You've created a pie graph generator in Scratch. You could get rid of these variables off your screen by going to variables and unselecting them, and then your user or your viewer will just see the pie chart. You could use clones and create a new one and make it a color so that you could create like a legend so that your user could see which item of the data is represented by which color. You could also make a new sprite as an overlay to make it a label of those items, or just to sort of spice it up a little bit. So if you've enjoyed this video, drop me a like, and if you're new around here, subscribe. There's lots more Scratch and CoSpaces, block coding, and education technology videos. If you think someone like a friend or a teacher would enjoy this video and want to do this activity themselves, do me a favor and share it with them. Thanks a lot for watching. Happy scratching.